For Alex, it all looked perfect on the surface. He had a good job at a marketing agency, a cozy apartment in the city, and a girlfriend, Emma, who he'd been with for almost 6 years. Their relationship, while not perfect, had always felt solid, like something that could stand the test of time. They had discussed marriage countless times, always with a sense of inevitability. It felt right. She felt like the one. Emma was stunning, confident, charismatic, and always at the center of attention. In the beginning, Alex had admired her strength, her independence, and the way she made him feel special. But over time, things had shifted. There were small signs, moments when she seemed distant, moments when she'd disappear into her phone, moments when she wasn't quite as excited to see him after a long day of work. He brushed it off, chalking it up to the usual ebb and flow of a long-term relationship. He spent long hours at the office, buried in projects that demanded his full attention. His promotion had come with a price, more responsibility, more pressure, and less time to spend with Emma. He felt guilty about the long hours, but his mind kept reassuring him, it's temporary. Everything's fine. But deep down, something gnawed at him. The feeling that Emma wasn't as invested in their relationship as he was. And though he refused to admit it, the doubt haunted him. Still, the thought of confronting her, of challenging the perfect image of their life together, was too painful to entertain. One evening, Alex came home late from work, his mind buzzing with the stress of an upcoming presentation. As he entered the apartment, he heard laughter from the living room. It wasn't just Emma, there was another voice. He paused at the door, unsure of whether to announce his presence or sneak in quietly. The laughter grew louder, followed by a murmur of words he couldn't make out. Then, a flash of movement caught his eye through the crack in the door. His breath caught in his throat. There was Emma, sitting on the couch, her legs draped over the lap of a man Alex didn't recognize. His arm was wrapped around her shoulders, and she leaned into him, laughing at something he said. Alex's heart slammed against his chest. He stood frozen, staring, unable to process what he was seeing. Emma's head tilted back as she laughed, the sound too intimate, too personal. Her eyes locked with his, and for a brief second, there was no guilt, no surprise, just a calm recognition. She had known he would see them eventually. The man looked up, his expression more confused than guilty. Emma quickly pulled herself away from him, standing up with a flurry of nervous energy. "Alex, wait," she said, her voice strained. "This isn't what it looks like." But Alex couldn't hear her anymore. His legs gave way beneath him, and the world seemed to spin around him. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the realization that the person he had trusted the most, the person he had envisioned his future with, had been lying to him for who knew how long. The days that followed Alex's shocking discovery passed in a haze. His mind couldn't escape the image of Emma and the stranger on the couch. His thoughts circled like vultures, picking apart every moment of their relationship, every conversation they'd had, every little sign he'd ignored. He replayed it over and over in his head, searching for clues, for something that could explain what he had seen, but nothing made sense. Emma had always been affectionate, loving, attentive. Or so he thought. The silence in the apartment grew oppressive. Each time Alex walked through the door, it felt like a ghost had taken residence there. The apartment, once their shared space, now felt like a prison, a reminder of everything that had been shattered. Emma hadn't called him that night after he left. She hadn't sent a text, nothing. It was as if she knew there was nothing left to say. In the days that followed, she did try to reach him, but each attempt felt more like a formality than a genuine desire to fix things. At first, there were the vague, apologetic texts, "I'm sorry, Alex. Can we talk? I never meant for this to happen." They were quickly followed by a string of calls that went unanswered. The more she tried to reach him, the more Alex retreated into himself. He couldn't bring himself to pick up the phone. He couldn't look her in the eye, not after what he had seen. He spent long hours at work, hiding behind the desk, drowning in spreadsheets, emails, and the never-ending stream of projects. It was easier than facing the turmoil at home. His colleagues noticed the change in him. They commented on his distraction, the occasional snap in his tone, but they didn't press him. Everyone assumed it was the stress of his job. But Alex knew better. It was the pain of betrayal, the constant echo of Emma's laughter with another man, the ghost of their life together now haunting every thought. When he wasn't working, Alex wandered the streets of the city, his mind always a step behind the truth. He would go for long walks, trying to clear his head, but there was no escaping the cold, gnawing feeling in his gut. How could Emma do this? How long had she been lying to him? What else had she hidden? Every time he walked by couples laughing together, holding hands, the weight of his broken relationship pressed down on him even harder. He felt like an outsider to the world he once knew. One evening, after yet another sleepless night, Alex found himself sitting at the small cafe they had once frequented together. It had been their place, where they would share morning coffee and lazy conversations about the future. Now, it felt like a cruel reminder of everything that had been lost. As he sipped his coffee, the door chimed as it opened, and in walked a couple, hand in hand. The woman's laughter rang out as she playfully nudged the man beside her. It was so familiar, so reminiscent of the easy joy he had once shared with Emma, that Alex felt a pang in his chest. His fingers tightened around the cup. Then, the woman turned her head. Alex's breath caught in his throat. It was Emma. She was standing by the door with a man Alex had never seen before. He was tall, with dark hair and a charming smile, and they were laughing together like old friends. Emma's eyes met Alex's briefly, and her expression froze. For a split second, she looked like she wanted to speak to him, to explain, but then she quickly looked away. The man beside her didn't seem to notice the interaction. He was still talking, oblivious to the tension in the air. Alex couldn't bear to watch. He turned his face away, willing himself to remain calm, to not let the hurt consume him again. But it did. It felt like he was suffocating in a room full of noise, all of it connected to her, to their love, to the lies. The woman's voice echoed in his head, "I thought maybe if I ignored it, it would go away." Her words from their earlier conversation replayed over and over, each one a stab in his chest. He had tried to convince himself that things could go back to normal. That maybe Emma would realize how wrong she had been and beg for his forgiveness. But seeing her again, with someone else, shattered that illusion completely. He had to face the truth, no matter how much it hurt. That night, Alex returned to their apartment, but he could no longer call it their apartment. The place that once felt like a home now felt like a battleground. He stood in the hallway, staring at the door. He could hear Emma moving around inside, the clink of plates, the soft hum of the TV in the background. She hadn't even bothered to call him after their encounter in the cafe. She had let him walk away without a word. It was as if she had already moved on, and he had simply become an afterthought. When he opened the door, Emma was sitting on the couch, eyes glued to her phone. She glanced up, but the apology she had ready was nowhere to be found. Instead, there was only uncertainty, the same uncertainty that had begun to settle between them weeks ago, months ago, without either of them truly acknowledging it. The silence stretched out like an old wound that refused to heal. Alex didn't know what to say. How could he ask for something as simple as an explanation when the damage felt so irreparable? Instead, he stood there, staring at her, searching for something, for remorse, for guilt, for the woman he had once known, but all he saw was a stranger. Her eyes avoided his, and her fingers twitched nervously, like she was waiting for him to say something. Waiting for him to fix everything. But he couldn't fix it anymore. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Emma broke the silence. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I didn't mean for it to get this far. But I can't change it. I can't take it back. Those words hit him like a blow to the chest. She couldn't change it, couldn't take it back. And neither could he. The realization settled heavily on him. She was sorry. She was always sorry. But her apologies meant nothing now. They were empty, hollow words that couldn't erase the betrayal, the hurt, or the years of trust that had been shattered. Don't apologize, Alex said, his voice thick with the pain he couldn't suppress. It's too late for that. And with that, he turned and walked out of the apartment, leaving behind the woman who had once meant everything to him. The weight of the decision crushed him, but deep down, he knew it was the only way forward. There was no coming back from this. The decision to meet Emma that day wasn't easy for Alex. It felt like stepping back into a world he had already begun to sever ties with. Every part of him screamed to walk away, to forget everything that had happened, but a part of him still needed answers. He needed to know how she could betray him so completely, how she could be the woman he thought he knew, and still lie to his face. There were so many questions swirling in his mind, questions he couldn't silence. Emma had suggested meeting in a small cafe in the heart of the city. It was a place they had once frequented, sitting by the window with steaming cups of coffee, talking about their dreams for the future. Now, it felt like a distant memory, an image of a life that was no longer his. Still, the thought of confronting her, of finding some sort of closure, kept him from turning away. As he walked through the door, the bell above it chimed softly, and his eyes immediately found her. She sat at a small table in the corner, her posture tense, her eyes focused on her phone. She didn't notice him at first, and for a brief moment, he almost turned around and left. But then their eyes met. Emma's expression was unreadable, a mix of guilt and something else, something that Alex couldn't quite place. "Alex," she said, her voice shaky, and for a moment, he saw a flicker of the woman he had once loved. "You came." He hesitated, unsure of what to say. Part of him wanted to scream at her, to demand answers for everything she had done, but he couldn't bring himself to act out of anger. Not yet. He had to hear it from her, to understand her side, even if it hurt. He sat down across from her. The table between them felt too small, too close for comfort. Emma had always been able to fill a room with her presence, but now there was nothing but an uncomfortable silence. Her eyes flickered nervously from his face to the cup in her hands, and for the first time, Alex saw how small she looked, how vulnerable. She had always been the one who held the power in their relationship, the one who knew exactly what to say, but now she was the one looking for answers. "I've been thinking about what happened," Alex began, his voice steady, though inside, his emotions were anything but. "And I don't understand, Emma. How could you do this? To me? To us?" Emma sighed, her shoulders slumping as though the weight of the world had settled on them. "I don't know," she said softly, almost as if she were speaking to herself. "I don't know what happened. But I've been lost, Alex. I've felt like I've been drifting for so long, and I didn't know how to come back. And when it happened, when I met him, I thought maybe it was a way to feel something again." Her words hit Alex like a brick. Lost. Drifting. These were the words she used to explain her actions. She was so casual about it, so cold. It was almost as if she had resigned herself to the fact that she had made a mistake, and now she expected Alex to just forgive her and move on. "How long has this been going on, Emma?" Alex asked, his voice raw with the hurt he had been trying to suppress. "How long have you been lying to me?" "I'm not lying to you now," she said quickly, her voice rising slightly in defense. "I swear." "But, it wasn't just one thing. It was months of feeling like I was invisible to you, like we weren't the same anymore. I tried to tell myself that it was just a phase, that we would be okay, but nothing changed. And then, I met him. It wasn't about him, Alex. It was about me. I was trying to find something I lost. Alex sat back in his chair, his mind spinning. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to hear that she had been confused, that it had been a moment of weakness. But the more she spoke, the clearer it became that this wasn't just about a mistake. It wasn't just a one-time slip. It was a symptom of something much deeper, something that had been brewing in their relationship for far too long. The truth was, they had both been avoiding it, the truth that they had grown apart, that they no longer knew each other the way they once had. "I've been working so hard, Emma," Alex said, his voice tight with emotion. "I've been focusing on building my career, on making sure we had everything we needed. I thought I was doing what was best for us. But all this time, you were pulling away, and I didn't even see it. I didn't realize how far we had drifted." Emma's eyes softened, and for a brief moment, Alex saw the woman he had once loved, the one who shared his dreams, his goals, his life. But then that softness was gone, replaced by a coldness that Alex couldn't ignore. "It wasn't just your work, Alex," Emma said softly. "It was everything. We were growing apart. You were there, physically, but emotionally, you were distant. And I felt it. I felt like I was screaming for you, and you couldn't hear me. I needed something. I needed to feel seen, to feel desired again. And when I met him, it felt like maybe I could have that. But I was wrong. It didn't fix anything. It just made everything worse." The words hung in the air, suffocating the space between them. Emma's confession was both heartbreaking and infuriating. She wasn't just confessing to a moment of weakness, she was admitting that she had been emotionally checked out for a long time, and instead of facing it, she had chosen to betray him. She had chosen to lie, to hide behind someone else. Alex swallowed hard, his throat tight with emotion. "So, that's it? You're just sorry? You think a few words can make this okay?" Emma flinched at the sharpness in his voice. "No, I don't think it's okay," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I can't take back what I did, and I'm sorry for that. But I need you to know that it wasn't about you, Alex. It wasn't about not loving you. It was about me not knowing who I was anymore. I didn't know how to fix it, and I thought this would help. But it didn't. And now, I don't know what to do." Alex felt the weight of her words press down on him, but they only served to deepen his sense of betrayal. Her actions had torn apart everything he had believed in, and now she was asking him for forgiveness, asking him to forget everything. But how could he? How could he ever go back to the way things were after this? "I don't know if I can forgive you," Alex said, his voice barely above a whisper. The words felt like they were being ripped from him, each one a painful release. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again. You've hurt me in a way that I can't even begin to explain. And I don't think I can fix this." Emma's face crumpled, and for the first time, Alex saw the woman behind the walls she had built around herself. She was broken, too. But that didn't make the betrayal any less painful. In fact, it only made it worse. "I'm sorry, Alex," she repeated, her voice so soft now that it was almost a whisper. "I truly am." But Alex didn't respond. He couldn't. The words were stuck in his throat, choked by the pain and the overwhelming sense that nothing would ever be the same again. For the first time in their relationship, he realized that no apology could undo the damage. Emma had chosen this path, and now, there was no going back. He stood up slowly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Emma reached out for his hand, but he stepped back, shaking his head. "I think it's over, Emma," he said quietly, his heart heavy with finality. "I think it's time for both of us to let go." With that, he turned and walked out of the cafe, leaving Emma behind, the woman who had once been everything to him. And for the first time in days, as he walked away, Alex felt a sense of peace. He couldn't fix the past, but maybe, just maybe, he could start building a future without the weight of betrayal dragging him down. Alex couldn't do it anymore. The endless back and forth, the emotional roller coaster, the lies that never seemed to stop, it had taken its toll. He had been patient. He had listened, he had tried to understand, but every day felt like a weight that grew heavier. Emma was no longer the woman he had fallen in love with. She had become someone else, someone he didn't recognize. One evening, as they sat in their apartment, the silence between them deafening, Alex made the decision. He had reached the breaking point. He couldn't pretend anymore. He couldn't stay in a relationship that had become nothing more than a facade. He couldn't let her continue to manipulate him with her apologies, with her promises of change that never came. "Emma," he said, his voice steady but filled with finality, "I can't do this anymore. I can't be with someone who doesn't respect me, who doesn't trust me. I don't know who you are anymore, and I don't want to be with someone who's been lying to me." Her eyes widened in shock, but Alex didn't give her the chance to respond. He stood up, grabbed his coat, and walked toward the door. His heart was heavy, but there was also a sense of clarity, of release. This was the end. "Goodbye, Emma," he said, his voice tight. He opened the door and walked out, closing it behind him with a sense of finality. Months passed, and Alex slowly rebuilt his life. The pain didn't disappear overnight, but with time, he learned to accept it. He realized that it wasn't about finding someone else to fill the void, it was about learning to trust himself again. He had given everything to Emma, but in the end, it was himself he needed to trust. As he stood at the window of his new apartment, watching the city below, Alex understood one thing clearly: sometimes, the hardest thing to do is walk away. But it is also the most necessary. He had learned that love wasn't about blind devotion, it was about mutual respect, trust, and honesty. Emma may have shattered their bond, but she had also given him the space to rebuild his own life. And that, in the end, was the most valuable lesson of all.